Good to have you with us here on the Tuesday edition of the South African Morning. School shoes are being shined, the books are being covered, but let's be honest, the parents are covering the books, not the kids. Why? Of course, it's back to school tomorrow for pupils in a number of provinces, including Gauteng, Free State, Limpopo, Mpumalanga and the Northwest. That's from tomorrow. So today, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga will brief the media on school readiness. Before we get to what the Minister has to say, how ready are we really? Professor of Education at Stellenbosch University, Jonathan Jansen, joining us. Prof, good morning to you. All the best for the year ahead. As I said, a new normal, a new year, but how different is this year going to be, or have we still not gotten on top of educating properly during COVID-19?
Good morning, Gareth. Yeah, look, in some way things have changed. I think the public mood won't allow for another, series of lockdowns in the general society, let alone in the schools. I think we also now have much better evidence that the results of continued closures or variations on closure, like these attending school in phases has been devastating to the learning of kids. So with all that in mind, I think we will reopen again. Clearly the unions have concerns, and rightly so, because they have to worry about their teachers. But the most important variable here is the children. And we will suffer enormously, not just in educational terms, but also socially, if we continue with some form of lockdown for the most vulnerable kids.
We always told, Professor, that everything as far as lockdown, the state of disaster, is being guided by science. I spoke to NAPTOSA's Basil Manuel a couple of minutes ago, and he was saying, based on the science, schools should open fully, but he did raise the concern, of course, of overly full schools, overcrowded classrooms, I think is perhaps the better way of phrasing that. That's still a problem, but that was a problem before COVID, wasn't it?
It was. And look, as our scientists, our eminent scientists have said, people like Professor Abdul Karim has said, if we only use science as our metric, we shut down the country, But unfortunately, we're not China, where social and political repercussions would be huge. And so it was purely based on science, but it also has to be based on a balance, I think, of science and common sense, And common sense dictates that continued closures would even further increase the gap between the educational achievements of the kids in the 20% of privileged schools versus the majority of children. That, of course, is clearly unsustainable.
What we do as far as lessons not learned. You mentioned that a lot of things have been learned over the last 18, 19 months, very quickly getting up to 2 years of lockdown in the country. What could the government and the country done better and learnt better over the past 2 years that we could have implemented this year? You were talking about the rotational teaching. That doesn't seem to work. Online teaching works for those who are privileged enough to do it. But almost 2 years later, have we really gotten any better at this?
Look, I think the single most important thing that governments can do, and the lesson we have not learnt, is to make sure that every single one of our 26,000 schools are adequately prepared to receive children, teachers, and other staff at schools. That we haven't learned. And so there's a huge variation, for example, in the provision of PPE equipment for a school in central Cape Town, Oranjezicht, for example, versus a school in Lusikisiki in the Eastern Cape. That's the reality we're dealing with. And that lesson, unfortunately, has not been learned.
So what do we do about what some people have criticized, Prof, as the knee-jerk reaction from government? Because we all get the numbers every day. We bring them to viewers every day as well. And based on the number of tests conducted, we do suddenly see jumps in numbers. But that's just how the stats are captured. But some people are critical of government, saying there's a knee-jerk reaction. There seems to be a big jump. Then we start closing down schools for a day or 2 days or doing half classes. And that's where this consistent sort of interruption of schooling comes in, especially for the little ones who need consistency in their life.
Yeah, I'm not normally, as you know, a fan of government, but I think they've done fairly well in trying to balance out the science and and the risk, that come. And so unfortunately, governments across the world, whether it's in the West or here, have all struggled to figure out how to land on their feet when, for example, there is a new variant and spikes in infections and so on and so forth. So it's not that easy, to simply be consistent in a sense with your mitigation strategies. That said, I do think, we could do much better in communicating with the public. I'm still waiting for a president to sit down with the country and take questions from you guys as journalists and answer people's concerns. We don't have that, eh? I mean, I hate Boris Johnson, just between you and me, but at least the buffoon sits down with his people, and as his medical experts flanking him on each side, and for an hour or two, people call in, journalists ask their questions. And in that way, the public gets some reassurance that at least you're trying to, connect with us. We don't have that. And I think in that open space of a lack of communication, in come the anti-vaxxers, in come the conspiracy theorists, and in comes the confusion.
Just between the two of us, Prof, the views of Boris Johnson, absolutely. Professor Jonathan Jansen, education specialist, Professor of Education at Stellenbosch University. All the best for the year, Prof. I'm sure we'll speak again. Appreciate your views here on the South African Morning.